We play against the Bills. Those guys, typically play cover 4 because they're a bunch of bitches. But besides that, they don't play man-to-man, So
They won't.
They won't.
What's good, folks? Welcome to a Wednesday afternoon live, little out of the ordinary edition of the Cover One Film Room, the show that gives you the hows and the whys behind both the good and the bad of the Buffalo Bills. I'm one of your two hosts, Anthony Prohaska, joined as always by Eric Turner. And Eric, we took a couple of weeks off. Things were, we're in the doldrums, the sleepy time of the off season, not much going on, but there are some conversations being had now and some pieces that we wanted to dive into for this episode, largely around some maybe potentially misconstrued narratives and some things that are being said that might not exactly be factually accurate. And we brought some stats and advanced metrics as we do along with the film, of course, to talk about with several topics in this episode. But how you feeling? How you doing? How's it going?
Good, man. It's an episode where we don't have a player on, so it could be better. But, we had a nice little run there having the players on to break down some film with us. So we took a little time off and enjoying the beginning of summer and, some nice weather finally. And so, as you said, there's some fun little stories that are happening in this downtime of the off season right before training camp starts, which we will be there in some capacity next month. But we wanted to talk about some of the narratives and topics that have come up over the last couple of weeks in this, again, quiet time of the offseason.
Yeah, and we let off with that intro featuring Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill, who we were talking about this bit offline. Like, I get it that it's technically not man, even though depending on how you play it, it can kind of play out like man, especially on the outside. But that's the conversation that we'll get into here. I just didn't realize that cover 4 was for bitches. Like, I just...
yeah, it was spicy, wasn't it?
Yeah, really. I just wasn't expecting... Like, so then by extension, because then he follows it up by saying, like, they don't play man. So then is every non-man coverage like a bitch coverage in his mind? I have since I sincerely have follow-up questions for him that I need to know, aside from the inaccuracy of what he said. But I legitimately have follow-ups because I was confused.
Yeah, it was a funny clip. I'm not even honestly sure which podcast that happened on, but when that quote was like circulating initially, I thought it was honestly fake. I thought it was honestly fake until I saw the video of it, which is what we'll play here in a second. And yeah, I think what he's saying is that basically most of the teams in the NFL are a bunch of bitches because not many teams play man-to-man as at a high rate. This is a zone defensive league. But if you did miss the intro and you did miss this quote from Tyreek Hill, I'm going to play it right here first, right now.
Everybody know me as a speed guy, but I feel like film preparation is important. Knowing exactly who you're going against and defensive coordinator going against. Every D coordinator is different. Whenever we play against the Bills, those guys, typically play cover 4 because they're a bunch of bitches. But besides that, they don't play man-to-man, So
They won't.
They won't. But teams typically play us cover 4, cover 2. We rarely see man-to-man. So if you know that, then you typically know exactly what you're going to get in that.
And again, he's not wrong. Most teams, when they play the Dolphins, like to play cover 4, cover 2. And the Bills, over the years, honestly, like early on when this regime came in, they were primarily like a cover 2, Tampa 2 type team. Then they started playing a little more quarters 2 or 3 years in because they had the safeties, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, that could match up against slot receivers when the cover 4 zone defense turns to man coverage, especially against teams that want to run vertical routes on both sides of the field, like the Dolphins do with all their speed.
Yeah, and like you also mentioned, it's the NFL isn't a man-to-man coverage league. Like, you see teams who will sprinkle it in, but even the teams that are at the highest clip of man, it is sprinkled. Like, now you can uptick it situationally or based on in high leverage situations, and those are when teams really kind of lean into it more. But like you mentioned, I kind of liked the notion of it just because of what the Bills have actually played against them, how it rotates in with their overall defensive philosophy. And it also made me kind of think a little bit, and the Dolphins have had offensively more success against the Bills defense that from a ground perspective that gets covered enough. But it also made me think, like, I don't know, is Hill in the passing game like feeling frustrated? Is it with the losses against the Bills? Is it because they tend to put a cap on things in the pass game and make the Dolphins try to beat them with the run, and the Dolphins don't, and eventually take that bait and come back? And it was just, I feel like it's such an interesting nugget in a multitude of ways, aside from the fact of no one's playing man-to-man like that in the league. And like, you're super fast, and so is Waddle. So who's going to play man-to-man against you? But also learn to beat zone coverage. If everybody's playing the same thing against you, then beat it. Like,
that's what's funny. In his comments really are a testament, or kudos, a tip of the cap to Sean McDermott and the Bills defense, because one, if Hill believes that, which we're going to show you why he believes that in many ways, it's really, a tip of the cap to those guys as far as scheme goes, because of the ability to disguise coverages, to make cover 2, cover 4, and cover 6, and even cover 3 at times look eerily similar, where one half of the field, it looks like cover 4, but really it's cover 2, and vice versa. So the Bills started playing a lot more of those split coverages over the last few years, split field coverages, where one side's playing this and the other side's playing that. But the reason why, as you said, the Bills play more cover 2 versus quarters coverage or cover 4 is because of the run game and the speed and the creativity behind the Dolphins run game. When you have those corners up playing cover 2 near the line of scrimmage, they can insert into the run game. They can set the edge, and they can come down and make tackles in the run game, which is obviously what this staff has always preached. The corners better be able to tackle because of how often those corners are involved in the run game.
Absolutely. You get that kind of natural force player responsibility when you're playing that cover 2 and they're clouding on the outside. And it also helps too, from a Bills perspective, who have their corners been really the past couple of years, especially since the midseason trade or the trade deadline trade in 2023, Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford. Both of those guys are very good run defenders in terms of responsibility and being assignment sound, but they're also good tacklers. They understand fit, they understand technique. And so it's a bit of a 2-for-1. You get that added support against the Dolphins ground game, but then you also get yourself leaning into the strengths of some of your corners and the type of guys that you've gone to, which is another reason, this is a conversation for another time, which is another reason why we maybe question the Max Hairston pick a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. And so we're looking at some of the Bills coverage rates from 2023 to 2024, regular season and postseason. And in the average column, that is the percentage of including the games against Miami. But we wanted to highlight the games against Miami as well. And you can see in cover 2, the average that the Bills play is 16.7% of the time over the last 2 years. Whereas when they play Miami, it's 36.1%. But you can see the quarters coverage percentage as well. On average, they play 13.5% of the time versus Miami, only 5.8%. The one that was interesting to me was the cover 6 percentage, and even the cover 1 percentage for that matter, because he's not wrong. The Bills don't like playing cover 1 against the Dolphins, but they will, as we will show, run some variations of their quarters coverage and their cover 6 coverages, as we'll show with film, which is, it's a little easier when you get to the film. But what other things would you like to add about this, man? This was no surprise, but like I said, when we get to the film, I think the fans and people that are watching will get a better idea of how difficult it is for Tua, Hill, and that Miami offense to really differentiate the 2 high split field coverages that the Bills run.
Absolutely. My biggest takeaway here is I just find it so hilarious that against Miami, their cover 1 rate, which is a man coverage, is higher than the quarters rate. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
It's just so fantastic. And again, it just really, I think the coverage versatility and variety that the Bills have, Miami, I think, is a good microcosm of it. Their ability to, we know what they are philosophically and from an identity perspective when we're talking about coverage, and really what they are as a whole when it comes to the defense. But their ability to kind of tune things up a little bit based on the opponent and or like what's specifically happening that week, I don't think it's talked about enough with the Bills defense. And even, going back to this data is for 2023 through 2024, even going back to 2022, Week 15, 2022, they had a 36.4 cover 1 rate against the Dolphins in that game. And then you go into the wild card game, which Tua wasn't there for, 27.5 cover 2, 25.5 cover 1 again against Miami. So knowing what's going on in certain instances, weather or where the Dolphins are in terms of their season and how they've been operating or weaknesses they pinpointed, or when Tua was out, their ability to kind of flip everything on its head and lean into what's best for shutting down and mitigating the Dolphins' best chance to score. I think it's also representative of what they've done against most offenses. And that him thinking that and then seeing the data and then seeing the film that we're bringing up now, I think is really just a testament to that. Like you said, the tip of the cap to McDermott and the defense and their coverage disguises the rotations, the variations, being able to hide the pre to post snap change, and even watching it on tape and you still are trying to figure it out. That's so important in today's NFL.
It is. It's tough because even the film charting companies that we use, they may chart a cover 2 rep as a cover 2 rep. And I'm looking at, I'm like, that kind of looks like cover 6.
How many times have you and I had conversations over the years and be like, what covers do you think this is? And then we have like a 30-minute conversation because well, it could be this. Well, it could be this. Yeah, but what about this? Oh, what about it's just, and that's a tip just from them.
Yeah, and we have that catalog over the years of watching this team, but also obviously speaking to a lot of the players at these positions. We can get a better idea than a third-party grading system that obviously doesn't have that type of information and tries standardizing things. But again, I get why the Bills play more cover 2, obviously with the run fits of the corners off the edges, but also not having Hyde and Poyer anymore to match versus receivers that going vertically. When you're playing that cover 2, because eventually all zone turns to man, but more specifically, when you're trying to play cover 4, if you're getting all vertical routes, hypothetically, those safeties are going to be matched up with wide receivers running down the field. And that's not what you want, especially when you have guys like DeMar Hamlin now, Taylor Rapp, Bishop. And so I understand why they want to go to more cover 2. And over the last 4 games, Tyreek Hill versus cover 2, 12 targets, 9 receptions for 109 yards and 0 touchdowns. I'd say that's capping an explosive player for the Dolphins. So good work there. So let's talk about some of these coverages. Let's kind of highlight how difficult it is to, differentiate the cover 2s versus the cover 4s and cover 6s. And we're going to start with just your basic cover 4 here. Against the Dolphins from a couple of years ago. Tyreek Hill is the number 1 to the bottom of the screen. And you'll see post-snap, they're trying to run just a little smash concept where he's kind of running to the corner. You're getting a little flat or arrow route to the boundary here. And so now when he talks about getting capped off, you have a safety over the top, and now you have a corner over the top. So he's capped. They're taking away the top. Same thing on the other side of the field. You have 2 guys high over there, 2 high to the bottom of the screen, and then you're having 1 guy cover the hook to curl the flats right there. Same thing with this guy to the bottom of the field, and usually where you get stressed is over the middle of the field because that linebacker has to match up with the running back coming out of the backfield. So this is really a vanilla, basic cover 4 look. The Bills cap Tyreek Hill, force Tua to move on his progressions, and it eventually goes incomplete.
Amazing job by Balen Spector at the middle linebacker, just shutting down everything in between the numbers, just locking it down.
Looking like Tremaine Edmonds out there.
Right. Oh, man. Shout out to the GOAT, everyone's favorite Bill for his entire tenure with no polarizing nature of that in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, and, not too much to add. Just I think they disperse this, especially to the bottom of the screen, just how the Bills play this. Great job by Cam Lewis. He's in the nickel in this game. Taron was banged up. And you have him highlighted there. Just great job immediately recognizing the play to the flat. He's even overplaying a little bit, like shading it, anticipating it, stays over the top, clamps down on it. Tua wants to go that way, but Cam plays it great. And then you essentially get a bracket on Hill, like you mentioned. And on the backside, they're slow playing it a little bit at the apex. Have a chance for Jonnu to get the ball if Tua is maybe looking there initially and spits it out right away. But the Bills do a good job kind of playing this out and covering up through the route distribution. Tua starts to get on the move, off-platform throw, which is not his strength, and he fires it out of bounds.
All right, and so that's a cover 4 look. Now, here's something when Hill would go into the slot. There, obviously, when he was at the Chiefs, when he's in the Dolphins, they're going to move him around a little bit. Well, the Bills have answers, and this is something that's been so fascinating to watch over the years of the different answers and different, techniques and coverages that they went to. So here is a cover 6 look. So to the bottom of the screen, the running back and the number 1 to the bottom of the screen receiver, they're manned up. You have Hyde over the top, and then you have a meg call or a man where he goes to the top of the screen. So it's man there. But then you can see right here, there's a little triangle of 3 over 2. So what the Bills are doing with Hill at that number 3 spot is pattern matching those 2 wide receivers. And so you'll see as Hill breaks his route off and runs a little stick route, look at the eyes and vision by everyone on this defense. He gets the pass, and immediately you see everyone rally to the ball to limit that play to Tyreek Hill on 2nd and long.
Yeah, I really love watching the Bills and how they match and how quickly their defensive players, even when you get the backups in there, their ability to kind of recognize and trigger and close. And you highlighted that triangle you got there. So Taron Johnson, he's waiting kind of the first of the flat and sees who's going to declare. Bernard is also eyeing up Hill because he's kind of walling off on the inside and waiting for whoever comes into him. So his eyes are initially on Hill, expecting, okay, number 3, if he breaks inside, I got to close down on him right away. Both of their eyes on respective men in their position. Taron Johnson also getting his eyes through to Hill, through to Tua. And then Taron, just that ability, because Hill is that 3, like we talked about. He goes to the flat. That becomes Taron's man because he's responsible for the guy to the flat. Taron closes down on Hill. And then you get the far side safety, who you have highlighted with the arrow there, would then pick up number 2 on the vertical while Christian Benford is manned up against Alec Ingold out there. So way to just kind of burn a body from the Dolphins. Shout out to them for that. But a really nice distribution and a stop for a short gain in an aspect where Miami likes to typically eat.
And if you guys don't know, cover 6 at its base is a mixture of half the field playing cover 4, half the field playing cover 2. This is a little different. It's not zone based. Obviously, you have a couple of man calls. So to the bottom of the screen, essentially, if you're just looking at half the field, it's cover 2 man. You have man-to-man coverage and safety over the top. But to the top of the screen, they man the guy out wide, and now you're working 3 over 2, pattern matching zone principles. So there are variations to a lot of these calls, and which is why there are times where Tyreek may be seeing cover 4 on his side, as we'll show here in a little bit. But really, it doesn't mean you're playing cover 4 across the entire coverage. And so the Bills have done a great job of messing with this stuff, especially these cover 6 looks over the year. Here is another cover 6 look. So bottom of the screen where Tyreek Hill is, it's man-to-man coverage. Rasul Douglas in man-to-man up at the line of scrimmage. He's got help over the top. Cam Lewis is in man-to-man coverage over the number 2. And then to the top of the screen, they're running a cover 4 type look. So again, to the bottom of the screen, you're getting man-to-man looks for Tyreek Hill. But again, you have that safety over the top, and you see that pass breakup by Rasul Douglas.
Yeah, this was, man, pardon me, I don't want to say like I'm going to miss Rasul Douglas, but when he was on, he was really on. Like in that physicality, the ability to use his length when he would be impressed, disrupt wide receivers, and just his confidence in that aspect. You see it fully playing out here. But yeah, like you mentioned, aside from the coverage aspect, again, something going on to the top, which is something different going on to the bottom. And this can be, especially when you get a team like the Dolphins who, you know, will spread you out and go 3-by-2, and then it's kind of like a 4 strong, or it turns into a 4 strong, but it's initially a 4-by-1. They motion guys, they change. The Bills defense has done such a good job of kind of having rules-based coverages based off of the alignment and the personnel that the Dolphins have. And you see that straight up man coverage from Rasul Douglas on Tyreek Hill, while you have a whole lot of different kind of action on the entire side of the field up top. And you can even, again, you know, Bernard and Taron, Bernard is on the line. He drops out. There he is there. And then watch Taron ready to read this route distribution and pick up who comes. So you get the number 2 comes inside to becomes the 3. There's Bernard sitting to wait and collect him. You've got Taron with eyes on the new number 2, but also kind of peeking at Jonnu coming across on the drag. Just good eyes and responsibility and matching from the Bills on that side.
Yes, great eyes, great discipline. And really what the Dolphins were setting up to the top of the screen is really just a screen that they did a bunch. They did it to the running backs as well in this game. But you see them trying to set up. These guys are just setting up the block. And it just goes to show that the Dolphins had answers for the coverage they were going to see, because this is going to be blocked up beautifully if Tua were to go straight to Jonnu Smith, who's running that crossing route. But he liked the matchup of Douglas because he knew that on the backside they were playing man-to-man. So there's going to be a window with Cam Lewis carrying that crosser. But Rasul executed better on this play with help over the top. He's allowed to play aggressive, and the Bills executed better. Again, you can know what coverages every team plays against you as an offense. As you said, everyone plays cover 4 or cover 2. But it's not just a vanilla cover 4, cover 2. There are ways to throw in some wrinkles in there. But in the end, you have to execute. And Rasul executed better on that play. So here is another cover 6 call with some man coverage on the back end of this. Again, cover 4 to the top and then man-to-man coverage on the bottom. So essentially like cover 2 man. This time Hill is at the bottom as well. Douglas opens up with him, and they're trying to get Smith matched up with Dorian right here on a man-to-man look outside the numbers there. And the Bills are able to shut down that play again with very good coverage pre to post snap against the Dolphins.
Yeah, and you'll get this look from the Bills when they get a 3-by-1 or any look with kind of the solo receiver on the backside. They'll lock that. A lot of teams do it. You know, that man coverage, that Meg, like you talked about earlier, man everywhere he goes. And essentially at this point, we've got a 3-by-2. The 2 is the running back in the backside. And he is a tight end, like you've highlighted. You've also highlighted Rasul Douglas pointing that out, calling out, hey, look who's in the backfield. This isn't a normal thing. Or maybe it's something they spotted on film and it's a tell and they recognize it. So he's calling that out, which is awesome to see from him. And then he takes care of Hill. Dorian is essentially locked on Jonnu, like you said, and they play this out really well in a split field aspect again. And even Rasul kind of just staying underneath on Tyreek. Jonnu gets a step briefly, but with that safety over the top, that's a throw that you really got to drop in the bucket and
keep it away from him.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just it's good stuff. And to the top of the screen again, you're getting that 4 over 3 look, that box type look for cover 6. And again, you can see these guys hanging tight to protect the middle of the field, but they also have guys deep. So again, the Dolphins could have just gone to this side and checked it down and got, taken what the Bills gave them, but they were attacking down the field. They were attacking a matchup in Dorian Williams with Jonnu Smith. But again, the Bills' scheme and ability to, carry these routes down the field on the backside of these formations really helped shut that play down, forcing almost a perfect throw to keep it away from the safety. So here's more of the cover 2 looks. Let's get into some of these, Tampa 2 cover 2 looks and how they can look a lot like the cover 4 looks or the cover 6 looks that we were just showing you. So here is just a traditional cover 2 look that can present itself like cover 4. So bottom of the screen, Tua really wants to go. They used to run this so often. So they'd run a guy out to flat here. They run a little stick, a curl route right here. And it's a quick pass out wide, but you can see the corner and the nickel do a great job of spacing and kind of squeezing this route. Normally in cover 2, you can see the depth that Spector has on the other side. You're playing in that wall area. But because the Bills know and are prepared against playing the Dolphins and how they love to do this, they would hang their linebacker down or hang their nickel down a little tighter so that they could take this away, which is what they do here. But this is just a traditional cover 2 call. But if you look at the spacing of the coverage and how it distributes, in many ways, it can look like cover 4 because, again, you got these 2 guys right there, spaced just like you saw in the last play. You got a bailing corner who could be a quarters player. You got a safety that could be a quarters player. You have another safety here that could be a quarters player, but you can see this guy's tight. So is it cover 4? Is it cover 2? By the time Tua goes through his progressions, there's no one open. He gets into the scramble drill, and eventually he checks it down for a 1-yard gain.
Yeah, minimal. And that's such a great point. Like, especially with how the route distributions play out, sometimes they play out in a way where you're sitting there trying to kind of decipher what's going to happen. Even, where Christian Benford is right there. Yeah. You're looking at Hyde on that side and he's wide. So you're thinking like, okay, that's kind of like a half field type of depth and alignment for him. So you're thinking he's playing over the top. Like you'd love if the receiver on the outside, the number 1, if he sits right at the 30, you get a clear declaration, Benford jumps him. And you're like, okay, cool. He's responsible for that. Right. There's a safety over the top. That's the cover 2 look on that side. But because the routes keep gaining depth, and we've seen the Bills corners do this before, Kyer Elam talked about it when we had him on the show, they're not going to cover grass. So Benford's not just going to sit and spot and be like, well, I'm supposed to cover in the flat, so let me sit in the flat. He is gaining depth along with the route distribution, even though Achane ends up leaking out into the flat there. And then, you see it on the bottom side, like you mentioned too, like Poyer, and also too, as we talk about this, your coverage and your depth and your alignment for the defense is always in relation to what the their offense is doing. So if they're condensed, like your alignments are going to match them a little bit. You're not just going to be in some static look. But the way that plays out to the bottom, yeah, you see Poyer kind of riding that hash, but then Dane Jackson immediately reacts. I almost said it wrong twice. Reacts to that flat route immediately there. So you're thinking, okay, he's the cloud guy there. But all of it, if you're sitting there looking like, there are some cover 2 elements. There are some cover 4 elements. Like they're matching a bit. They're hitting like depth and their alignment. And it's even sitting here knowing we watched it, you can make a case in a multitude of ways. And let alone in game when it's happening all in the blink of an eye processing it. It's, again, a testament to what the Bills do.
And just look at Tua and how quickly one step, and he's going through 2 of his reads or progressions already. 1, 2, gone. Okay, 3's not even developed yet.
Yeah.
That's how quickly the Bills, because of their formational alignment, the muddiness in the coverage, how quickly they took away half the field. He's trying to get to his 3rd read in his progression, and he just can't. So he has to extend the play. And again, you said in last way, if you're asking him to play outside of script, off platform, it's really not where he wants to be. He wants that first read, that primary read or two, to be the go-to guy. So another cover 2 play here, very good discipline. Safety's down initially, but then you see as the ball snapped, you see him drop out, and the Bills are matching the coverage here. And again, there's nothing open. And so the quarterback throws it to the flats, and then you see Benford discard the fullback and go make the tackle. Playing high to low, cover 2 defense, keeping everything in front of them. And they do a great job on this play of minimizing any type of big play down the field.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one, based on how the route distribution plays out, we kind of get that look from the coverage structure that allows you to decipher that this is cover 2. Look how wide Taylor Rapp is on the top of the numbers there. Damar Hamlin kind of matching it on the other side and then reacting to that post from the number 1. And then you get the action from both corners being those flats players. Douglas in press to the bottom of the screen, tries to reroute a little bit, carries his man, but then turns back, looks inside, ready, waiting to see if anything develops in the flat underneath. Is somebody coming on the drag, something that he has to be responsible for as he potentially passes off that vertical to the safety. And then Benford on the other side doing something similar, being responsible for the flat. I love this play so much from Benford. It's one of my favorites from this year. We see that kind of that escort swing get baked into so many offenses now, and it should be advantage for the offense because you got a hat on a hat, and Benford just plays right through Alec Ingold, who's a legitimate fullback, and makes the stop.
And this is the type of stuff that's next play, the cover 2 with the rotations, the cool rotations post snap. So on the snap, you really don't know what the Bills are doing here. Is this more of their cover 6 look? You got the safety down or the corner down there in man coverage. Is the safety or linebacker now accounting for this running back? Kind of like we saw a few plays ago. But watch what the Bills do post snap here. Watch Damar Hamlin come down and become the strong side rotation. So strong side, passing strength, 3 guys to the bottom of the screen here. Watch how he drops down on this play, and the Bills jump into a Tampa 2 look, an inverted 2 look. Here's your pole runner, the linebacker. But now Hamlin's dropping down from that deep half safety spot, becoming that wall player along with Dorian Williams. And you see this, the corners are hanging low as well. And you see Hamlin come up and make the tackle after a short gain.
I love these type of spins on the snap, just the little wrinkles to change something a little bit. And like you highlighted, you get Hamlin coming from depth and ends up inserting into the hook curl. And you look at Cam Lewis, who's right now in that apex to the bottom of the screen. He kind of screams out of his, stance immediately because he knows he's got to get to that flat. He's becoming that new flat defender, that cloud defender, essentially replacing Christian Benford, who is now essentially a deep half safety along with Taylor Rapp. And you see how everything plays out. Even Douglas to the top, he moves initially with number 1, but then he sees the running back settle. So he stops, he sits. We get a little vertical from number 1, and Dorian reacts to that, knowing that he has Taylor Rapp over the top. And then we have the pole runner inspector. Just really a really good job. Again, playing through this route distribution from the Bills, tying into the good call and being able to change things pre to post snap when it comes to the picture on the quarterback, especially a backup in this instance, kind of put him through hell a little bit more. But just a really good job of, again, you think one thing's coming and then post snap, it's something completely different. And they're able to shut down Miami as soon as the ball touches the receiver's hands.
And this is the crux of the Bills defense: force the quarterback, especially against zone, to go through all of his progressions and reads. You see initially where his helmet's looking, he's taken away. Obviously, running back's taken away. So now he's going to work to the bottom of the screen. He's got a double China 7. So he's got 2 in breakers, and then he's got this deep corner. So essentially, where the quarterback goes is to his third read over the middle of the field on first and forever. But that's because of the, what's vacated here. But if he wanted to push the ball down the field, he'd have to make it to number 5 in his read here, which again, you got Christian Benford playing a deep half area, and he's got some space and time to break on that ball. So again, making the quarterback, extend the play from the pocket and go through all of his progressions. It's something the Bills really, where they hang their hat. Here's one where I think it's Micah Hyde that is the inverted, basically the quasi Tampa 2 pole runner of the linebacker. Watch post snap as he drops into that deep hole there, and the Bills rotate. And eventually, by the time the ball gets to Tyreek Hill, the Bills are there to make a play because the pass is not only coming out of structure off platform from Tua, but because they're to the short side of the field. And so it's much more condensed. Now you get, 3 guys closing in on Hill, but Taylor Rapp is there to make a play on the ball.
Yeah, really nice play from Rapp on the ball. And again, like you said, we get that inverted Tampa 2 look, or a Tampa 2 robber, as some people kind of highlight it. And Taron Johnson, in his normal nickel apex roll to the bottom of the screen, he drops as a deep half safety. So you've got Taron Johnson and Taylor Rapp as your deep half safeties, and Micah Hyde as that Tampa player and that quote unquote pole runner. But instead of playing it from, a linebacker depth and carrying, he's playing it from the top down to kind of take away that middle of the field, which is, where that pole runner operates, which is why people talk about why Tampa 2 is kind of like a cover 3, even though it's in the cover 2 family, so on and so forth. And then we get the corner action on the outside, Benford and Dane Jackson relating to each route, but you can see they're acting as cloud players there. Dane allows Barrios, number 0, to go across on that drag. He sees the tight end settle, so he picks him up. Similar to Benford on the outside up top, sees the little hitch from the running back. He starts to settle as well, but also does a good enough job knowing something coming behind him. I like this job from Benford where he reacts to what's in front of him, but he still does enough gaining depth to maybe influence that throw from Tua and having to get it over him and allowing Taylor Rapp a couple extra seconds to make a play on this ball.
Yeah, just fun stuff. I loved going back and, kind of watching that stuff because, like I said, there is some truth to what Hill is saying, because there are some elements of, if you're combining cover 4 and cover 6 and putting them kind of in the same bucket, half the field could look like cover 4 to Tyreek Hill, especially when he's the isolated wide receiver out wide, because you're going to have a safety over the top and, a lot of times the corner on him. So he's bracketed in a lot of these calls. And so, I guess the Bills are a bunch of bitches when it comes to that. So pictures can look different to, with how complex defenses are and have to be with the way offenses have evolved. You're going to get variations to simple cover 2 looks like that, right? You're going to get sometimes the deep half safety is going to drop down and be that pole runner and rob the middle of the field. Sometimes he's just going to be a wall defender and go make the tackle, like you saw DeMar Hamlin do in the second to last play. There are variations to these coverages, but a lot of the times in the Bills scheme, you heard Bill Belichick say it years ago, how well the Bills disguise their coverages, especially pre to post snap. And you could see some of that in some of those clips we just watched.
Yeah, just again, like you hit it, a testament or tip of the cap to McDermott, this defense. It's something that, and I don't know if it's because they don't do enough variation or creativity of it, but creativity being relative, I don't feel like they really get their flowers when it comes to the disguise coverage nature of the defense and how long they've kind of been at the forefront of that movement. And so much of it was with, Poyer and Hyde back there. And now that they've got a changing of the guard at safety, we see their usage rates change a little bit, especially against certain teams. They do a good job of knowing who they are and then mixing that in with trying to mitigate what an opponent does best. And I think that's a really good example, just what we showed here and what Tyreek Hill thinks he sees week in and week out for years against this defense.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, man. And some other fun stuff. We're talking not just scheme, but some of the detail and technique stuff. We heard from some of the minicamp footage about how Ryan Nielsen, who is a consultant right now, how detailed he is. You heard Terrell Bernard talk about how detailed Nielsen is, and we got to see it in some of this footage. This is courtesy of Sal Capaccio. I'm going to play this, and we're going to talk about the level of detail that is being executed here. And then, of course, we got a couple clips of the prior teams that he's coordinated, Ryan Nielsen, executing some of this. So I want you to watch this little interior game being executed from camp here. Right there, you see Nielsen getting picked off by Terrell Bernard as he's playing the blocker there. So right there, you see the D-tackle attack inside, then go outside. Here comes Bernard on this game or loop. Boom, he picks off the hip of that offensive lineman, and then you have freeze up at Oliver, which is always fun if you can get him free and rushing the quarterback. So talk about Nielsen, what you like from him, especially from that Atlanta Falcons film from 2023, and what level of detail and why he has so much detail to even just little drills like this. I swear, in a lot of these drills, when we're talking D-line or games, you see Nielsen kind of coordinating the drill. Yeah. And not Marcus West like you see off to the left side of the screen.
1,000%. First thing, I'm with Kay and Morty here. It's going to take me a minute to get used to Terrell Bernard in the number 8. True. Like it's throwing for me. I'm waiting for the 43, but it's throwing me a little bit. And yeah, you and I have talked a couple times on air, off air about what Nielsen did with the Falcons in 2023. And that was a unit that was consistently able to attack with different games up front, 5-man pressures. You kind of didn't know who was coming where, who was going to pick who was going to be the spiker, who's the looper. Is it a 2-man game? Is it a 3-man game? They're mugging gaps. They've got linebackers walked up. And it was a defense, no disrespect to anyone. They didn't have a ton of talent on that defense. You had Grady Jarrett on the interior, but there weren't a ton of names. There wasn't a ton of, recognition individually for that group. And they found ways to get creative with their pressure packages. And it was because of a lot of havoc creation up front. I think the amount of free runners that they would generate because of picks. Love the little Ed Oliver layup there as he came free there. That was nice. The picks that they would create, or the confusion using offense's protection rules against them, creating a man look and then dropping it or using it to pick someone and kind of screw up the protection up front. It really was a good schematic job from Nielsen in that 2023 Atlanta Falcons year, and something that he really hung his hat on. And you can see pretty regularly when you go back and watch the tape.
And when you heard Terrell Bernard talk about it after practice, about the level of detail that he was executing, Nielsen was showing in that drill, and how it involved the linebackers and defensive linemen executing interior games like you see there, that level of detail is not surprising, because you got to think about it as a defensive coordinator, which he has been for a few years now. Mm-hmm. That level of detail it takes a lot, because you're not only teaching the guys in these drills, but you're teaching your entire staff. All the positional coaches have to know how you want it taught and the details on what is being taught as far as technique, timing, rhythm, all of those things. So there's a certain level of detail that Nielsen has that maybe even Bobby Babbage doesn't quite have, and it hasn't quite gotten there yet, because Nielsen has done it for so long, and he's had some talent and some production when it comes to being a DC. And the other thing is, like, maybe they brought Nielsen in to, for the future and to be the Aaron Cromer of the defensive line. Maybe that's true, but right now he's technically a senior consultant or something along those lines as far as title goes.
Yeah. But he's doing a lot of consulting.
He's doing a lot of consulting.
A lot of ownership.
Yeah. And when you're freed up like that in that type of position, a lot of times you bide your time by having a certain packages or roles, or, when they divvy up stuff during the week of, hey, can you cut up 3rd and 7+? We want you to not only know what you're going to see, but come up with the packages to combat it. That's going to help the Bills this year. That level of detail as a coach, but also that freedom that he has as a coach to teach that technique and teach those little details that make a difference on these type of games, as we'll show here on the next 2 clips. That's going to go a long way this year, I believe, for the Bills pass rush.
Yeah, we've talked about it for a couple of years now, wanting more games up front in a variety of ways. And if you're going to run that kind of stuff, the proverbial devil is in the details. Your timing has to be on point. Your steps, your path have to be on point. Even the first example that we showed in the minicamp clip with Bernard and Oliver, think of the timing. Like Bernard has to time that right, so that way he picks the hip of that blocker right at the time when Ed can come free. Ed has to be able to see it and feel it and come free. You don't want to cause, any type of congestion on the interior with guys bumping into each other or getting in each other's way. And that's not even taking into account the other guys up front who are trying to distract other linemen and cause chaos for them. It's a very coordinated dance, and you need everyone to be on point with their timing, their footwork, and their responsibility.
And I just love this play from the Falcons again, 2023. Look at the look. It's an odd front look. You have a guy head up on the center. You have several guys up near line of scrimmage. Who's coming? Who's dropping? They end up dropping out in the zone. But watch the two guys I highlighted, the linebacker and the nose tackle. Watch the timing. Remember that clip you just saw from Bernard and how they were attacking and how they timed it. There's a linebacker picking off the center and ricocheting back into the play to get the sack. This is the type of stuff that the Bills didn't run a lot of last year as far as defensive looks, but also the stunting and looping, because they just didn't have, I don't think overall they had the tools in the tool shed to do these type of things. They have that versatility and agility and timing now, where if they're working on it like they are in minicamp already, they can develop that rapport and that timing. And you can see that here from this Falcons clip, running a 4-man pressure, a 4-man rush. But again, going from a simulated pressure look where everyone's up near the line of scrimmage, but only really rushing 4 to get the sack.
Yeah, and you're gaming up like two really good guys at center and left guard, and Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson are two of the best at their respective positions in the business, especially at this time. And you highlighted it. Great timing from the linebacker. He sets up outside initially and takes that stab. And then I really like how with the angle he takes, he crosses face, which brings Nelson 56 with him. But that's just added candy. He is going to pick Ryan Kelly, who's number 78. And then that pick allows 90 to come free. Like you said, the pocket is collapsing around poor old Gardner Minshew at that point. And I also like that initial look, like we showed here, and you talked about it, like who's coming. You've got, starting from the right side, you've got Jesse Bates to Bud Dupree. So you've got like a safety down there. You've got an outside linebacker. You've got the furthering the odd front look on the inside with a 4-eye. The center is covered up. Then you got a 4 on the other side. And then you've got a wide rusher and an actual edge rusher in Ebiketie. And then you've got the apex who's pointed inside, showing like he's rushing, but he ends up dropping. And so how do you account for that as an offense? It's just nice to watch a defense ask this many questions, or have an offense have to ask this many questions. And like you said, it ends up just being a quote unquote simple 4-man rush and a sack.
Right. And same type of look here. Again, different personnel and look here. The linebacker Lloyd is really just sugaring the center here. He's not obviously a defensive lineman in a 2-point or 3-point stance.
Sugar that gap.
Sugar that. And so similar look, but again, now this is the Jags, so it's a different defensive front. Again, Nielsen has the ability to kind of play hybrid type fronts, and especially if you're talking pass rush packages. But here's a man call versus the Colts. You get that pick, and then you get the free runner, the defensive lineman, and an incompletion on the back end. But you're heating up the quarterback. You're affecting the quarterback with a similar interior game there between a linebacker and a defensive lineman to make the pass go incomplete.
Yeah, and another one where, typically when you cover up the center like that, like they are here with Devin Lloyd, like typically that'll cause that man protection or that 5-0 protection from an offensive line. And you see them react, kind of looking for their men. And because you've kind of induced that as the defense, you kind of can anticipate, okay, we're going to show this. They're going to react like this, which means we can execute like this. And that's what they do. A really good job from Lloyd to spike and pick that right guard, which allows Armstead, number 91, to come free. So a different look for a different team, but a similar result, similar ideology, and similar path and result, just with a completely different team.
Yeah, so that's going to be exciting to continue to watch, especially once camp starts, seeing what different plays they can really cook up with, the versatility they added with the personnel, the talent they added with the personnel, on top of, again, those down and distance specialties that Nielsen can bring to the Bills defense to help Bobby Babbage in those third down situations. Because the Bills do I mean, as bad as, they were against the run last year, they did get teams into 3rd and longs quite often. They just weren't good at creating the pressure or getting home to bring the guys down. So I'm excited to see Nielsen's impact and his role going forward, especially if you're talking interior games that include linebackers rushing again, out of creeper and simulated pressures where you're having Bernard rush or you're having Milano who's healthy rush, because Milano's 80% of what he can be, that opens up things for the linebacker positions and what they can bring, because now you don't have to worry about, hey, he can't rush. He's got to stay back because Dorian's in coverage. So there's a little more versatility when it comes to, pass coverage and pass rushing abilities from that linebacker position.
Yes. And we've highlighted for years how good Milano is as a rusher and a gap shooter and like causing havoc. And one of the things we talked about the most when Bernard was drafted from Baylor, aside from how pro ready he was and understanding match coverage and rules, his ability as a blitzer. He was a heat seeking missile going after the quarterback.
So good.
Yes. And but he would be that spiker at times where he would just barrel in and you'd watch him like where you could tell his assignment was like, hey man, just go try and rock the hell out of that guard to clear up space. And he would do it. Like one of his strengths is that ability to blitz and rush and timing and angles. And we haven't seen him do it too much. So I would like to see that tapped into a bit. And it makes sense, right? With how they've continued to operate this offseason on the interior. They didn't opt for, displacement mitigators up front. They leaned into the penetration, the gap shooting, the triggering ability. And I think pairing that with Nielsen's forte up front and just more stunts and more games, they're really going to lean into the, we may get got, but we're going to get you. We're going to cause havoc. We're going to throw off your protection rules. We're going to throw off your run schemes. Like you think you're going to down block on somebody, but psych, that guy's going somewhere else. And now you're pausing for a minute. Someone's shooting behind you and into the backfield. I think they're really going to lean into that type of havoc creation, which again, can get you got at times, but also will allow you to get others aside from just being that typical, 4 down, 1 gap penetrating type of front that they typically are, even though they mixed in a bit more 1.5 and things like that the past year.
No doubt, man. So another topic that's come up over the last couple of weeks is the contested catch ability or lack thereof for wide receiver Keon Coleman. So I want to talk about this briefly and get your thoughts on it. K. Mori adds the rewatches on Discord with Greg. Seems like every other 3rd and long is a conversion. Exactly. And you got to affect the quarterback more. And again, getting pressure is one thing. Getting home would be even better to help with field position and help.
I was going to say, you got to say that before anybody comes in and like, pressures suck. They don't matter. You need the sack.
I know, man. I know. But it's still going to come here. That's not going to stop people.
I'm never going to end. Thank God Tremaine Edmonds left. So that was one less thing for us to have to talk about all of them.
So I saw this come across the timeline during the week. Contested catchability, Keon Coleman, bottom left quadrant there, which is not good. So I wanted to contextualize that. That's what we do in the film room. We add some advanced stats to support or disprove a lot of the narratives that are happening. We're going to use the film as well. But I want to get your thoughts on Coleman's contested catchability. It was a big thing coming out because I do think that there were some expectations that were not worthy of being there when it comes to him being a contested catch guy, just because of how, when he did win, how that really was perceived. But talk about Coleman coming out when it comes to contested catch and what you saw from his first year in the league.
I choose to believe that that was a very sneaky play on words, and you said worthy in reference to Xavier Worthy. I choose to, believe that. I choose to believe that. So I like that very much. Yeah, this chart is per FTN. Like if you want to go off PFF, out of 110 qualifying wide receivers, Coleman was 90th in contested catch rate. So kind of however you track it, it's not great for his rookie year, right? And there's a heat map, which kind of shows a lot of where he was operating. But I think, you talked about, being worthy of, certain labels and pieces. We talked about it when he was drafted because his contested catch ability at times was spectacular. We talked about the ability for him to dunk on guys was very real in college. And we also saw it in the NFL this year. He had multiple contested catches against Baltimore, against Seattle, against Arizona that were like, whoa, like you're posterizing dudes and putting them on a poster. But I think what gets lost in that is even amazing dunk artists in the NBA who put dudes on posters, they're not doing that every time they drive the paint. They're not doing it every game. Like it happens. They're more highlight plays. It's hard to consistently operate in that space. And again, we said this when he was drafted. it's hard to be like a contested catch winner consistently in the NFL. These guys,
which is why we wanted separators, right?
Yes, it's tough to. These corners are big and long and strong and smart, and they have good technique, and they're probably just as athletic as you are. A lot of Coleman's winning in college was because he has the size and frame paired with the athleticism. Now he's going up against dudes who also have size and frame and athleticism and better technique at corner than what he has at wide receiver. And when you pair that with his limitations in technique, his limitations as a route runner, and then pairing that with how the Bills chose to use him, which we're going to talk about, it creates kind of an almost a predictable siloed type of role, which makes it even harder to win at the contested catch point or in that contested catch role, which was already hard to begin with.
Right. And we knew he was going to be the above the rim type player. Like we knew that's how and why Josh and Brandon Beane liked him and the staff liked him. We knew that he was going to be that type of guy, but they also wanted a boundary guy. They wanted a guy not just to stretch down the field and play above the rim in those 50-50 situations, but they wanted someone to stretch horizontally the field and play outside the numbers. We talked about it all last offseason and leading into the draft.
So much.
So last year he finished with, according to True Media, this is regular season and the playoffs, 65 targets, 32 receptions for 578 yards and 4 touchdowns. Actually, not that bad, all things considered, with him being injured. But if we look at the heat map, we're going to see that it was kind of limited on how and where the ball was thrown to him, where he was targeted. And a lot of it was, as I was just saying, outside the numbers, along the boundary, not a lot of stuff inside. And to contextualize that, you heard Brandon Beane say it a ton after the season, how young he is, Keon Coleman is. So that's one factor to a player's development, but also, the role he played and what was asked of him. They didn't move him around a lot. So if you're only playing outside the boundaries as an X or a Z, there's only so many routes you can run. And the route that they asked him to run the most were those go routes. 26 targets were go routes last year. He has 7 receptions on those plays. By far his number one targeted route. Some of those, obviously, we're not going to go through each of them, but some of those are not even catchable. Some of those are back shoulder type throws where Josh maybe threw it deep, where he snapped it off, or vice versa. But as you can see from this heat map, for his total targets, a lot of that stuff was outside the numbers. And as I said, half of these passes went incomplete last year in his rookie year.
Yeah, this heat map does a good job of kind of showing his role in that heat map form. And you can see a lot of everything is just outside the numbers and to the sideline. You're not really getting a lot of work inside in the middle of the field, in the gut of the defense. And as this continues to play out, if you're a defense, you see how someone's used, you see what the alignment looks like, you continue to see that. And there is that element of predictability from an alignment perspective or a usage perspective. And then on top of that, if you're a defender or a defense, you know what kind of route he's going to be running or how he's used. And then that pairs also with his limitations as a player, where he's not this big separator. His stem work isn't the best in terms of, getting in and out of breaks and deception. So if you're used in this similar way, which is predictable for a guy who already wasn't the best as a separation guy, and then you're throwing essentially him like goal balls or back shoulder throws, that's going to impact your ability to separate. That's going to impact the contested catch rate because you're not going to have any room to operate or any margin for error for both Allen and for Keon. And then you take in this chart with the incompletions on top of it. That just kind of puts it even more into perspective of, again, how he was used relative to his skill set, but the type of situations he was put in and how advantageous or not that was for him.
Yeah. I mean, if you're only doing so many things, like you mentioned, it's going to affect separation or how much you don't separate, but also the contested catch situation. So these are all the incompletions on targets that were at him. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, how much separation and how often were these contested? I bet you damn near every one of the ones that are outside the numbers were contested catch.
I can see these. Granted, we watch a lot of tape. I can see these incompletions in my head and just know the route. He's starting out a little on the numbers, a little outside. He's going up. You want to hold him to hold the red line a little bit more, but it's not a great amount of space or area to work. Yeah, you can just see it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And so this is just context to keep in mind when we're talking about his play. And of course, injuries played a role. So you talked about the Arizona game versus, obviously the first game of the year, but then later in the year, the injury played a role with him. Obviously, you add in he's young. They're not moving him around a lot. He's got a really niche down role because again, you hear the staff and this regime talk about it all the time. They have specific particular plans for developing these players. And you could tell it was a very limited development plan for Coleman. Hey, we need you to do this. And he actually did it well, if you're all things considered, for most of the year until he got injured. But so watch this kind of outside leverage read release by Coleman to the bottom of the screen, how physical he is, and then snaps that route off, throws that guy by, and doesn't quite get the first down. But that's another story for another day. But then this is the last game of the year, bottom of the screen. Look at how he approaches this one. Not as physical, and then there's no push-off. There's no physicality. Again, the injury was playing a factor last year for him. So just a couple of, clips of the same type of route where you can see where the same dog wasn't there, if you're talking from the shoulders up and mentality, but also the physical wasn't quite there in the first game versus the last game. As you said, he had some really nice plays, especially if you're talking 50-50 balls down the field against Arizona. Whereas in the Patriots game with backup quarterbacks most of the day, they were just throwing some stuff up, which accounted for a lot of those, those targets on those go routes down the field that went incomplete.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Just guys, bit towards the end of the year there in that Pats game, just chucking it up and seeing if a prayer is answered or not. But it's a really good highlight of the injury. He had that wrist injury that caused him to miss time. He came back, and you saw it impacting him. That labeling it as kind of not that same dog in him tracks. Like, this is the type of route, especially against a corner with a bit of a thinner frame, you would expect him to win. Like, he understands how to beat these kind of guys. Like, you want somebody to get into his kitchen with a thinner frame and then, okay, cool, let me chuck you by or run you by and separate. And you just don't see that. And for a guy who's not going to win in this route with tempo or pacing or gear changes or his deception or movement yet, he's relying on the physical aspect and physicality almost 100% of the time. And if you take away some of the strength or comfortability in his hand and his wrist, that's going to impact a lot of what he's able to do or not do.
Yeah. And so I got a couple of clips I want to talk about with his drops, because 3 of his 5 drops were over 20 yards. 23 of his 33 incompletions to Coleman were versus cover 1 or 3. So you're getting the one-on-one looks outside to him. But again, that's why you're seeing the boundaries painted so much. And again, that's why you're getting a lack of separation, but also contested catch situation. So here's one that was considered a drop by True Media. Big game for him against the Seahawks, but this is one where coming off the line, I don't like how he tempoed down right there. He kind of stops in that window right behind that cornerback. You want to see him get into this hole between the safety or the deep half player and the corner. He kind of lets up and makes it more contested than it should be. And then he does the same thing that Kincaid was doing, right? He kind of does this basket catch when he probably could have just attacked it with his basketball background. And of course that gets dropped and goes incomplete. I don't know what it is. Maybe part of it, I assume it's Josh Allen. And when he throws these types of passes, he throws them flatter and he's not really dropping it in a bucket into the turkey hole there between the deep half player and the corner. But some of it is like just framing it properly, whether we're talking Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman on this play.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Seattle for this that cover 2 spin and taking Devin Witherspoon from the apex and dropping him as a deep half player, like you talked about. Number 21 there on the screen. I was
like, oh, that's Witherspoon. That's not a safety. That's a deep half
player. I did the
player.
same thing too. I was like, safety. I was like, oh, it's Witherspoon. Yeah, and they're kind of spinning on the up top too in terms of responsibility. But you see that cover 2 look from them, and yeah, you hit it like it's just there's that little bit of disconnect in terms of his tempo and timing and how he runs this route, and maybe where Josh is expecting him to be, that combined with the type of ball that Josh throws, like you talked about. And, this goes back to an episode we had several years ago. If you're going to push the ball downfield, the further you push the ball downfield, the smaller your margin for error, because it's downfield. It's harder to be on the same page. That's why defenses, will kind of push that at certain points. And Coleman's, whether it's his hands or maybe if he's in better position because he didn't kind of tempo that down a bit, maybe he doesn't have to extend as much. Yeah. Maybe Josh reads him a bit better, whatever it is. Just a missed opportunity there because of the disconnect and kind of how he stemmed that route and then combine that with how Allen operates.
And here's one against Baltimore down the field. I was bummed about this one because he had this one in his hands, as you see from the end zone angle. Again, big play down the field. Josh drops it in there right to Coleman. This is the matchup you want. Your down the field player against Stevens, who we broke down, was terrible down the field. And you get Coleman one-on-one with him, and the ball hits him right in the hands and chest and goes right through it. Just one of those plays. Again, 3 of the 5 drops over 20 yards last year for Coleman. This is one of them against Baltimore.
Yeah, this is the one that immediately comes to my mind. Just with the drops and contested catch stuff. Like you have a corner that can get beat a little bit. You know, Stevens maybe gets his left arm in there a little bit to dislodge it or cause a problem, but you got to come down with this if you're Keon Coleman. Like this, I think for a lot of fans is what like the poster, the microcosm is for like, wait, this is what he's supposed to win on. This is why we got him. And he drops that. And even I like the way he fights through initially, but again, not a lot of separation. He has to separate kind of with his hand and some physicality right at the last minute and kind of go up and get that ball. But Stevens is really in phase with him for the heavy majority of this entire route. Coleman separates a bit at the catch point with his arm and actually does a good enough job. Like the timing is good from Coleman. It's right in your hands. Also does a bit of a basket catch again, cradles it, ball comes out. These are the ones that if you have a niche role, you can't afford to be off in that niche role because these opportunities come few and far between.
Yeah, so just a couple of things to work on with him. I agree. I think Lauren says swole Coleman season incoming. I think that strength could do wonders for him because when I stood next to him last year at camp, he's obviously taller than me, I'm sure. So, but he wasn't thick. He was he was basketball-like body, very thin, agile, but like just not a thick football player. And
not a bully at the wide receiver spot.
But I do think he has it in him. And so as his seasons and career progresses, I do expect him to get stronger. Where on that, like a play like that, he's going to create a little more separation through the vertical route stem so that when the ball is incoming, it's so much easier to concentrate on just the catch and not the hand coming up in front of him from that defensive player to make it a contested catch situation.
Yeah, very fair. And I also think too, a lot of this is, for me, it's not ideal, but also if your expectations were Keon Coleman was going to come in as a rookie and set the world on fire, like that's your own fault for kind of setting those expectations. So much of what he was at Florida State was based on, and Michigan State as well, was based on physicality, size, frame, athleticism. He's a young player in general. He's also young to football. He was playing basketball and football at Michigan State. He just became like a full-time football player 2 years ago. He's very green. He's very raw. He needs time on task. He needs time to develop. And his one area that he can hang his hat on is an area that's hard to find consistent success in the NFL, which is being a contested catch guy. So I think a lot of this needs to, and then pairing it with the context that we put it in here, I really do think he needs a pass, but I think there seems to be a lot of hyperbole when it comes to him and fans already writing him off as, no, he's terrible. They made a huge mistake. They should have grabbed Worthy. They should have grabbed any other wide receiver, although we did really love Ladd McConkey and would have welcomed Ladd McConkey. But if you're making a concrete decision on Keon Coleman after year one, you can't do that. This is a dude who legitimately needs like 2 to 4 years in the league to really figure out who he's going to become. Mm-hmm. And for better or for worse, he might be figuring that out on a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And so I think that's part of it too. If he's on the Jags, you're like, okay, let's let him develop. But he's on a team that's trying to win a ring. So 100%. You don't have that. You are not afforded 100%. That time and that margin for error with regularity. And I think a lot of that gets lost in the conversation and people just kind of see it with blinders. And that's just not the way to go about it in general, but especially given the context that we kind of put his rookie year and performance into.
Yeah, and when they drafted him, we did the breakdown on him. You said you could see him lighting it up in the role that was asked of him, but at the same time, not having a role at the end of the year either, because there was going to be such a volatility to his development in year one. But I think that's why they decided to bring him along very slowly. Yes. And this is the role you're going to play. It's going to limit you overall. You're not going to be able to max out your year one. We're going to go long-term, as you said, 3 to 5 year plan, as opposed to just throwing you into the fire because they have such a good team. That's the other part of it. So it's kind of, is it the chicken or the egg? But yeah, nice. I think overall it was a successful season for the player that we knew coming into the league, into the offense that and what they needed in this offense, I think it was successful aside from the injury. We'll see how year 2 is. I do expect him to recover. So one last topic before we get out of here. There was a clip on a podcast I saw on YouTube that really caught my attention talking about ranking the offensive lines in the NFL. So I wanted to bring this up real quick and get your guys' thoughts on the Bills' offensive line. They were on the Pushing the Powell podcast. They were ranking the offensive lines. And one of these hosts said that the Bills' offensive line was elite, but the other one said the following.
Got these guys in sync.
Oh, they're giving Cromer some love too.
When we talk about Coach Cromer, he's got these guys in sync and they work well together. So when you talk about the unit collectively, yes, they play at an elite level, but I think they're more of a solid group. But to your point, right, everything flows through this offensive line when it comes to the run game, when it comes to Josh Allen. And you know this, it's important.
So he doesn't think the Bills' offensive line is elite. What's your thoughts on that, Anthony? I know we love Aaron Cromer, and I think I know where you're going to go with this, but are they an elite offensive line or are they just a solid offensive line?
I think, and everything is, relative, how you define them as being elite. I do think they're an elite offensive line with how they operate, just because the run game diversity, being able to hit gap scheme and zone, but then the type of gap scheme that they hit, and again, a lot of that is due to Cromer setting these guys up for success, and then how they are as pass protectors. Like, they are just good in the run and in the pass, but then they're diversified in the run game. I think a lot of it comes down to, for like national guys, Deion Dawkins is the most name recognition. I think Spencer Brown might put some people on notice this year, or if he hasn't already.
They mentioned both those guys in the entire episode of that, and it was like an 8-minute clip, but they did mention Deion and Spencer Brown as being upper tier guys at their positions.
I think they fail from kind of as a group in terms of being recognized as elite because, one, you have Josh Allen. So I think a lot of people think, well, Josh Allen does Josh Allen stuff and bails everybody out. But I still don't think people realize two things: how much the run game is the foundation of the Bills offense, even though they have the MVP quarterback. And also, there's just not a ton of, Deion Dawkins is the best left tackle in the league, or David Edwards is the best left guard, or McGovern, or whatever. Like, a lot of times everybody loves to laud the Eagles because they have this name recognition and star power. Same thing with Detroit, name recognition and star power. So I do think it's a combination of things, but I do think this is an elite offensive line. I don't think they're the best offensive line in football, but they are just tremendous individually as a unit, well coached, the run, the pass, and they are the straw that stirs the drink. This offensive line is what, for, again, Josh Allen, nobody yell at me. I get it. He's really good and he's the MVP, but the offensive line is the straw that stirs this drink for the offense and what makes it go.
If we're talking about a unit, 5 guys playing together in the run and pass game, and we're ranking the Bills offensive line versus everyone else in the league, how can you not consider them elite? They have great coaching. They have a great scheme. They have the technique, and each technique for each player is different. And we talked about that with Cromer. We talked about that with, players that have come on here. Each player gets a certain level of technique and skills developed and catered and tailored to them. Their communication, we see it week in and week out on the film. We hear it from guys coming in like Connor McGovern blew us away when it came to the preparation and communication that happens, verbal and nonverbal, on the field. They obviously have talent. You said, yes, Dawkins and Brown are very good. Connor McGovern, I think, is an underrated center in the league. I think he's in his prime right now and reaching his prime.
Edwards is underrated too. Like, even amongst the fan base,
he's the biggest technician of all of them almost.
And everybody in the fan base is even always like, we can get rid of Edwards. It's like, David Edwards is super good. Like,
and you heard McGovern talk about how talented he is from a technique standpoint, how he wins, or maybe it was Osiris. I think it was Osiris that actually
I don't remember.
Gave Edwards.
We've had too many guests. Not the Patterson, so I don't remember.
But I love what you said about the run game, the array of schemes they can get to, gap, man, zone, whatever type of scheme they need to run versus the defense are seeing that week. So they can be a chameleon in the run game, but they can also be a chameleon when it comes to pass protection and run blocking. They can be a finesse team if they want to be a finesse team. If they want to play a zone scheme outside zone scheme, they have the ability because of the guys up front, but they want to be physical and beat you down. They have the nastiness up front, the mentality to just drive guys against their will off the line of scrimmage, reestablish the line of scrimmage in favor of the offense, and do what they want when the defense knows it's coming. So that's what I love the most about this offense. Yes, the scheme's great. Joe Brady called a great scheme last year. Cromer puts together a really good run game plan. But I love their ability to be a chameleon as far as finesse versus physicality. And when you have the talent, the technique, the coaching, the scheme, when you have all these things come together, to me, those are all the pillars of a great offensive line, a great offensive line unit, and why I think they are elite.
Even going back to the year before, like they've had, you can make the case that they arguably have had like the best top 6 offensive linemen the past like 2 years, with how good Anderson was last year and then how good Edwards was the year before. Like it's just, they're just such a good unit together. And I don't know if it's because they are such a good unit together that that sexiness isn't there. Like there is no Quentin Nelson or Lane Johnson or Jason Kelsey or Mailata, or like the units that always get talked about from an offensive line perspective being the best. Even with Dawkins and Brown being upper tier, they're still not that level of upper tier. And so I think that knocks them a bit, which is really unfortunate because but again, to go back and not to beat this just drum too much, I think people are still grasping their head or wrapping their head around the run game being the most important piece. That's why so many people are like, oh, well, what about the receivers and the receivers? And like, they don't care. They're about to put 3 tight ends on the field and go jumbo at the same time and run through your face. Like that's what they want to be. They're not spreading you out and going, 10 personnel or 3-by-2. Like this is what the team is, run by the offense.
That's why it didn't make sense for me if you guys watch the entire clip of Doozable talking about how they're just a solid offensive line. He actually said right after that part where I cut it, he says that the Bills really don't have many wide receivers. Didn't even remember Khalil Shakir's name. So he was saying they don't really have a true number one, and it's really Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things. So he was kind of making the case for having a top tier elite offensive line without making it. It was so funny. But again, no hard feelings against him. It didn't make sense to me because it sounded like he was proving the case for Bills fans when they say their offensive line is elite, because again, I believe that they are. And right now it's just like, I feel like it's the golden age of the Bills offensive line. The last time I felt this way was, coincidentally enough, when Aaron Cromer was here with Shady and that run game, Richie Incognito, cooking up pancakes left and right, setting records in the rushing game. So I do feel like it is the golden age of the Bills offensive line, and we'll look back as this was one of those better offensive lines that we've seen in our time, honestly.
Absolutely. And especially with where we've come in the Josh Allen journey, with what the line started out as, and then they tried to piece things together. And especially now coming from like a really good group 2 years ago, and then they changed it all in the blink of an eye with McGovern moving to center and Morse going away. And we're like, oh man, like they were so good. What are they going to do? They stayed just as good, if not got even a little better. And how they've developed, even how the thing that sticks in my mind after we spoke with Osiris Torrance, one of the clips in the film room with us, and he was like, well, I'm not going to, bury this dude, because if I buried him, it would have gone into the back of Deion's legs and I could have hurt his knee or something. Like, that's how tuned and locked in they are as a group. They're not only executing assignment wise, but they're also locked into the point of like, I'm just going to block this guy, but keep him up because I don't want to knock him into one of my other offensive linemen or hurt his knee or ankle. Like, they're just on point. And when and you see that execution and that health and that consistency week in and week out, massive no jinx, fingers crossed for everything I just said. I want to put that out there. It came into my mind as I was saying it. Yeah, this is, and even if you like, I would have even been okay if he said they're not elite, but they're like really, really, really good. Like they're more than just solid. Like that, I'm not accepting that from anyone. This is a top tier group for a top tier team, and they deserve their flowers. Erik, anything else on your mind before we say goodbye to the folks on this Wednesday afternoon?
No, I know it's an odd time for us to go live, but we want to get it out there and you guys can consume it before, Cover One Buffalo tonight with Brandon Thorne. Go watch and listen to what he has to say about the Bills offensive line, what he thinks about that unit as overall when you're comparing them to the league. But thanks for those that joined us. And thanks to Joe DeRosa, our producer. We're going to be bringing along one of our new producers, Colin Ritchie, as well. He's going to be helping out with the new show that Sal Capaccio and I we'll be doing once training camp starts, and then once each week following the game. So Colin will be helping out there. So he's been hanging out in the background with us today. So, but thank you guys for joining us. We couldn't do this without you. I'm excited. It's still a few weeks away, but I'm excited to get out to St. John Fisher, to get out there, watch some football and watch camp. But we're gonna figure out some topics to kind of hold us over the next couple of weeks till we get there.
Yeah, it's that slow time, but you know what you're getting from us. We're not doing an episode unless we are fully into it and the topic is worth it. We're not just going to put out content for the sake of putting out content. So we appreciate everyone who joined us this random Wednesday afternoon. If you're living in the Western New York or Buffalo area, it's kind of hot, but also kind of ugly and muggy out. So enjoy the day, but also maybe stay inside, whatever you choose. Do you? We appreciate you stopping by, whether live, whether post live, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever form your consumption comes in. We are very thankful for it and appreciative of it. If you're watching here on YouTube, please drop a like on this video, turn on notifications for the Film Room channel, subscribe to the Cover One playlist, or the Cover One channel as a whole, I should say, and the Film Room playlist. Rate, review, subscribe on the podcasting apps and platforms. Word of mouth is also tremendously important in our game and what we do. So if you like this brand, the show, the channel, the episode, tell your family, friends, loved ones, all that good stuff. We greatly appreciate you folks for tuning in whatever form you tuned in. Thank you very much to Mr. Joe DeRosa. Thank you very much for Colin hanging out in the back and chilling with us in this episode and learning the ropes for some things. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. For myself, Anthony Prohaska, for the founder of Cover One, Mr. Eric Turner, this has been another episode of the Cover One Film Room. We will see you when we see you. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.